Welcome to the D&S Diversified Technologies May 2015 Trainer Webinar. I am Kelly Berger, the D&S Diversified Technologies MAP Program Manager. The first area that we would like to cover with you would be our website. The web address is www.hdmaster.com. From our website, you will locate the following information. You would be able to find new test sites posted at the top of the web page. You will want to monitor that periodically. We add those sites and the types of tests offered at those sites as soon as they're available. When you go to the WebETest portal to enter your staff demographics, you want to first check to see if they have an existing record. If they have previously trained with another provider or with you and have exhausted both the original training and the refresher training available through that record, the old record must be archived first. You will then be required to re-enter their demographics along with the new training dates. You cannot just type over training dates. If you would happen to type over a training date, it will cause issues in the software in relation to testing history and which training that is in effect for. It also then causes delays in scheduling their testing. The old record would have to be archived first, and then you would have to enter the new record before you could proceed with scheduling them. Skill testing trends. For the medication administration portion of the test, staff still do not use the correct count page. This is the largest error in reference to the medication administration test. They either do not use the index page at all and just select an incorrect page from the book, or occasionally they do look at the index page and they either only pick the first page for the person they're administering to, but it's the incorrect drug, or they look down the index page and find the first page for the drug that they're administering, but it may not be for the person that they are administering to. When staff are doing the demonstration of their checks, they do not compare the correct documents. In a large number of cases, they are trying to do the first check as a comparison between the pharmacy label and the count page, or the pharmacy label and the medication sheet. As you know, the first check must be the pharmacy label to the HCP order. They also have errors in the verbalization of the 5 rights. A large number of times they will only use generic terms. They will say, I found the right person, I find the right medication, I find the right dose. But they don't list that information, so we can't tell that they've actually found the correct person. If it is Chip Brown, when they're doing their comparison, they need to indicate Chip Brown on the pharmacy label and then Chip Brown on the other form that they are in fact comparing to. They also need to make sure when they are doing that comparison that they're clearly indicating to the tester where they're finding that information on the document that they're using for that check. So if they are looking at the pharmacy label, they need to indicate where they're finding the name Chip Brown on that label, as well as where they are finding the name Chip Brown on either the HCP order or the medication sheet, depending on which check they are completing at that point. If they are just looking at the form but not indicating where they're finding the information, we are not able to assess that they correctly know where to locate that information for the comparison. So that would result in a failing score on that check. On the transcription test, the most forgotten data would be correct start and stop dates. More often, it's the stop date in the new order portion. They will write in the start date, proceed through the transcription to complete the grid, and then forget to go back and put the stop date in that order portion box. The next most common error would be in listing the times for the medication to be administered. They must list AM and PM next to the time, whichever is relevant for the time that they selected. They cannot list noon as a time. They also forget to list MG next to the dose and the strength. They will just list the number, so it'll say 0.5 or 1, but it will not have milligrams beside it. They also reverse the dose and the strength frequently, and they set up the grid incorrectly. The largest error on the grid portion is that the instructions will specifically tell them what time they are home with the medication. They will confuse that time and believe that that is the time that they are at the HCP. And so they will list that time in the grid, but exit out that they would not be administering at that time. That is incorrect, because since they are home with the medication at that time, if they list that as a time in the grid, they are required to leave that box open because they are able to administer the medication at that time. So they need to keep that in mind when they're listing their times in the grid portion. They do also have the hour time frame in order to administer. So if they list an hour afterwards, obviously they're going to have to leave that open as well. So given that situation, if the scenario states that they are home with meds at 1 p.m. and they choose the 1 p.m. time, they must leave that box open. And they could administer that drug up until 2 p.m. We have collected the exit survey data. These surveys are optional. The staff are given surveys after they have completed their testing for the day. The information that we will be reviewing are the exact questions that the candidates answered on the survey in the order in which they answered them. The data that we are presenting to you is valid as of November 2014 through March of 2015. As you can see, it lists for you the question, their possible answers, and the percentages for which they've entered. There are a few of them that I would like to review with you. I would like to indicate that question number 3, I attended my original MAP training for, or please mark E if your most recent training was for recertification or refresher purposes. 13.6% of candidates indicated that their MAP training was for fewer than 12 hours. It is a state mandate that all MAP training program courses be at least 12 hours long. Many are longer than 12 hours, but the state mandate is that they must be in those courses for at least 12 hours. The next question I would like to review with you, number 10, Did you find the medication administration video very helpful? 73.9%. Somewhat helpful? 19.2%. Not helpful? 1.6%. I didn't see the medication administration video, 5.2%. That video is mandated by MAP regulations. They do have to see that video as part of the training course. This number is monitored by the state to indicate that trainers are actually following that policy of having the candidates watch the video. I will say, in watching the video, candidates are tending to memorize exactly what's done step by step. So in the video, the staff person is administering 2 pills. So when staff go to testing, they automatically assume that they'll be administering 2 pills. They need to be careful that they're listening to the information that they're reading in their 3 checks to determine if they would be administering 2 pills or if it would just be 1. They cannot just assume because the video administers 2 that they should be doing so at testing as well. MAP testing pass rates. We will be reviewing certification test pass rates on the next few slides in several different ways. The next slide will represent numbers regardless of the number of times that it took the candidate to test on each portion of the test in order to pass. So this would just be the overall pass rate. This data was collected from April 1st of 2014 to March 31st of 2015. The knowledge pass rate has a 74% overall pass rate. So 70% on the knowledge is a good number. The skills overall pass rate is 60%. An overall pass rate, meaning that they've successfully completed both the knowledge and the skills, is 60% as well. Candidates tested in that time frame, 9,082. The next data that we will be sharing with you is relevant to candidates who pass all 3 portions of the test on the first attempt. This indicates that they never had to retake any portion of the test. So they sat for the knowledge and passed the knowledge the first time, sat for the skills, both the medication administration and the transcription, and passed all 3 portions on the first attempt. For the same time frame, that percentage passed on the first attempt is 51.6% of candidates tested. That's a very good percentage. And the number of candidates that passed were 5,555. The next 3 slides will represent a specific portion of the test, meaning that the candidate passed one specific portion the first time, but did fail another portion and had to retake. First time pass rates for knowledge during the same time frame, we have broken it down by funding source. For DDS, the first time pass rate on the knowledge test is 74%. DMH adult is 80%. DMH youth is 75%. First time pass rates on the transcription for DDS is 68%. DMH adult is 73%. DMH youth is 71%. Medication administration, first time pass rates, DDS 73%, DMH adult, 77%. DMH youth, 74%. We will next be reflecting data relevant to recertification percentages. This data is only relevant to candidates who completed the recertification process through D&S. So any in-house recertifications that you performed for your staff will not be included in this data. First-time pass rates for recertification on the transcription. For DDS, it's at 64%. For DMH youth and adult, it's at 45%. First-time pass rates on recertification for the medication administration. DDS is at 65%. DMH youth and adult are at 70%. DDS and DMH requested some additional information in regards to the time lapse between the completion of training and the dates that the candidate actually tested to determine what percentage of pass rate was if they had tested 30 days out or within 60 days or within 90 days, to determine where the training cutoff time frame should be. They did determine that candidates taking tests within 60 days of their training completion have the greatest chance of success. After 60 days, the pass rate drops well below 50%. Then it gradually declines every 30 days after that. The higher pass rate within the first 60 days, it artificially inflates the overall 365-day pass rate to 49.6%. In actuality, the pass rate is met between 61 and 90 days. 80% of candidates tested within 90 days of completed training. 95% of candidates tested within 180 days of completing training. Statistics show that candidates who do not test for the first time within 90 days of completing training are significantly less likely to pass in their first attempt. It's probably more reasonable for a service provider's perspective to change the MAP required test completion time frame following training completion from within 365 days to within 180 days, meaning that instead of having 1 year to complete the testing, candidates would then be required to have completed testing within 6 months. Verification forms. In response to having a large number of issues at testing with names not matching between what was entered into the database and what was presented on IDs at testing, we created a verification form for trainers to use during their training program to ensure that the information that was entered into the database matches what is going to be listed on the IDs being presented on test day. This form was created to remove that situation from occurring. If a candidate comes to testing and the names do not match, it will result in a no-show fee and the candidate will be turned away from testing on that day. This form has been in existence for more than a year now. However, there continues to be a large number of name issues still occurring on test day. So we greatly encourage you to start using this form during your training to avoid those no-show fees. If a candidate's address changes between training and testing, that is not an issue. They may update their address as many times as they need to. They can update that on test day, or they can call our office, but they will not be turned away from testing if their address does not match. As previously stated, this issue can be eliminated by using the verification form, if you are not already doing so. If you are unsure where to find the form, here's a quick review. You would first need to go to our website, which is www.hdmaster.com. Select the Massachusetts MAP Testing and Registry page. Under the column titled Test Site Forms and MAP Trainers, you will locate a red bar that says WebETest Online Testing. Directly below that red bar is a button that says WebETest Start Page. When you click on that button, it will bring you to the WebETest Start page, which has all of the areas relevant to entering information for training and also for scheduling testing and verifying employment. To locate the verification form, you're going to click on the button labeled Provider or MAP Trainer. You will log in with your trainer information. And you will notice along the top of the screen, there are several buttons. There is a button labeled New, a button labeled Print Template with MP_agenda located beside that, and then a button labeled Print PDF with a drop-down box as well listing the first medication sheet for your pre-tests. You will want to first click Search to locate the candidates that you want to print the desired form for. You can select either by class start day, class end day. If you only have one person that you need to print it for, you can type in their social security number, or you can just click Search and bring up a list of all of the candidates listed underneath your trainer number, in which case then you could utilize the Include All box, or you could uncheck that and only select the candidates that you would like to print the form for. Once you have your candidates selected, you are going to click on the down arrow beside MP_agenda and click the very last item in the list that says MP_verification. When that item is blue and showing in the box, that is when you know that's the form that you have selected to print for your candidates. You will then want to click the Print Template button, which will bring up a new screen, and it will show if you have selected 10 candidates, it will have 10 candidate verification forms, each one listed one right after the other. On the screen, it appears that these will print out as one long form. In reality, they will print out as individual forms. So you can then take them to each of the candidates, lay the form in front of them, have them pull out the IDs that they are going to be using for testing to verify that what is on that ID is what's in the system. The largest issues we find in relation to the name situation is either there's a junior that's not included, or somebody's name is Walter Mark Smith and they do not like to go by Walter, so they tell you that their name is Mark Smith, but on their ID it is listed as Walter Smith. When they go to testing, that is not going to match and we will not be able to test them. You can have the candidate then check off that they have checked this information and that everything matches, as well as checking what ID it was that they brought with them and will be taking with them to testing. The candidate then signs off on the information. If you have to make any changes to the information that's entered into the system, you can also check off there and list your name and the date that that occurred. At the very bottom of the form, it will list information for you as the trainer as to their prior training and testing results. So you will be able to see if they have previously tested, what areas they had the most issue with. Were they able to get through the knowledge portion? Did they only have issues on the transcription? That'll give you beneficial information while you're training them as to what areas they need the most help on. Once again, you will have them verify their government issued IDs with this form. You can at that point update WebETest if needed, and then you will keep that form with your other training documents. So if there's ever a question that they told you that it needed updated, but they did not really tell you, you will have that form as documentation. If you have a name that needs corrected and the staff is not scheduled for testing yet, you can go into their record and update that information. You would just double click on the item that you need to update until the data shows in blue. Once that information shows in blue, then you are able to go ahead and change the information and just click submit updates. That will update the WebETest demographics, and you will not have to do anything further. If you have already scheduled your staff for testing, you would then be required to send into our office copies of that staff's U.S. government issued ID. That must occur prior to testing. You cannot just schedule the candidate for testing with the wrong name and then after scheduling go in and change that information without providing us documentation. What occurs is when your staff is scheduled for testing, their name is listed on the testing documents as it shows in their record at that time. Any changes made after their schedule will not be reflected on the testing materials. So if you make the change after they are scheduled and send them to testing, they are still going to be shown as a no-show because we did not receive documentation in the office to update that prior to testing. So once they are scheduled, send us over a copy of the government issued ID and we will update that information both in our system and with the tester. And then the candidate will be able to take the test. You can reduce the associated no-show fees by using the verification form. If there is a question that a candidate tells us that they did update that information with the trainer on the verification form and the trainer just did not enter that new information into the system, we would be contacting you to get a copy of that verification form. So if you have those in your files, then you're able to send them over. It's documentation to cover that you entered the information that the candidate gave you. We have met recently with both DDS and DMH, and we are reviewing some challenges that are currently occurring in the testing process. Those challenges would include test security, including wristwatch policies, testing for deaf and hard of hearing candidates, candidate conduct at test sites, change of trainer between original training and remedial training, and the D&S new system rollout for the updated software. We put into place last October a wristwatch policy. At this time, there are several cell phone companies who have created fully functioning cell phone watches that have full internet access. Due to the different number of styles available in these watches, we're unable to determine on test day which watches are cell phone watches and which ones are not. So your staff are unable to wear wristwatches at testing. They will be required to remove those at the beginning of their test session. This is to ensure that no one is cheating on that portion of the test that they are scheduled for. DDS and DMH are working on creating a video to train sign language interpreters on specific MAP terms that are listed within the curriculum. They are creating this video so that it can be used in training and testing to ensure consistency for DHOH staff so that they are seeing the same signs and relevant to those terms in the training program and in testing. This is to reduce confusion for those staff relevant to MAP only terms. They do expect that the release of this video will be before late fall. Change of trainer between original training and remedial training. Staff who have failed testing 3 times have 2 options. Option 1, they can complete a remedial training with the original trainer. They cannot complete a remedial training with a different trainer than they originally trained with. Or they can complete a new full certification training with a different trainer. So at this time, they cannot do the original training with Sally and then go to Jane to do the remedial training. They would be required to go to Jane and complete an entire new course if Sally wasn't available for the remedial training. TestMaster Universe is the new software that we are working to create to simplify the process. Release date has been delayed. We will be creating a trainer webinar prior to the release, much the same as this webinar. It will be posted on our website to provide that training information for you. Please watch the blue box at the top of the MAP page. We will be posting updated release information there as it becomes available. It is not available at this time. We are also working with DDS and DMH in relation to a couple of new policies. Those would be the severe weather policy and inappropriate conduct by candidates at test sites policy. We are requesting volunteers to help review the new policies prior to inception. If you're interested in volunteering, you can send an email to the office, the hdmastereast@hdmaster.com email address. List my name in the subject line, so just list attention Kelly, your name and the provider that you work for so that we can add you to that committee. You can also send information to Sharon or Sandy in order to be part of this panel. We are requesting at this time that you remember to update your contact information with our office. If we would need to contact your provider in relation to one of your staff members and MAP testing, we need to have on record the name of the person that should be receiving that call. We do know you have staff changes there. We have them in our office as well. So we do have some outdated information. Please email the name and phone number of the person that we should contact at your provider to hdmastereast@hdmaster.com. You can type in the subject line for that email, MAP contact information. Please make sure that when you send that information, you list the entire name of your provider. There are several providers out there that have names that are similar. We just need to ensure we're updating the correct information for that particular provider. We are sharing with you the link to the MAP-friendly DPH website. This is the Drug Control Program Department of Public Health. This page will lead you to all the information that you should need in relevance to MAP, policies, and anything along those lines. Our contact information, our mailing address is D&S Diversified Technologies, P.O. Box 418, Findlay, Ohio 45839. Our phone numbers 877-851-2355 or 877-201-0758. Our fax number 419-422-7395. Our office hours are from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Saturday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are closed on Sundays and holidays. Our next page is just staff here in the Ohio office. You talk to most of us on a daily basis, and we just thought you'd like to see what we look like. The only person on this list that does not actually work here in the Ohio office is Whitney Marshall, who is our MAP mentor tester. She actually is there in Massachusetts. She does site visits. She also does testing at several locations. The next section will be a review of testing process for new trainers and providers. So at this time, we will review information about the testing policies and procedures for new trainers and providers. If you are familiar with the process and are not in need of this review, please feel free to log off of the webinar at this time. We would like to thank you for your participation up to this point. D&S policies. We will be covering D&S Candidate Handbooks, scheduling and canceling tests, no-shows to include no-show fee waivers, arrival time. We will review the name changes for staff before and during the testing process. First item on the list is the D&S Candidate Handbook. These handbooks include all testing policies. You are able to view and print that from the D&S website. It is a PDF version. Or you can order them from our office at no charge. The candidate handbook that appears on the website in the PDF version does have any changes that have been made since the last copy of the handbook was established in red ink. So it is easier for you to look at that and determine what has changed since the last version. In the handbooks that you order from our office, they are a little blue covered booklet that are completely printed in black. So those changes are not highlighted in that manner. My suggestion would be to print yourself a copy in color from the website and then order the little blue handbooks for your staff to be handed out. You can order those from our office. There is no charge for those handbooks. We will mail them out to you directly. You can give those to your candidates so that they're able to review the testing policies prior to testing day. Scheduling and canceling. What is the time frame for testing after I have completed the training? At this time, state mandate is that you must complete your testing within 1 year of completing the training. If you do not complete in that 1 year time frame, you would then be required to train again an entire training course in order to receive another 1 year time frame. What if I can't test on my scheduled test date? If you contact our office more than 2 business days ahead of the scheduled test date, you are able to either reschedule or cancel with no penalty. What are the rescheduling timeframes? As I just stated, you must do so more than 2 business days prior to your scheduled test date. In the 2-day requirement, the 2 business day requirement, please be reminded that that does not include weekends and holidays. So Saturday, Sunday, and any federal holiday would be excluded from that time frame. We have included for you in the Candidate Handbook a chart that will show you a simplified list of if you are scheduled on a specific day, when you must contact our office by in order to reschedule. So if you are scheduled for a test day of Monday, you must call our office by Wednesday of the week before in order to reschedule. If you are scheduled for Monday and call in the Thursday before, it is too late to reschedule at that point. Name changes or ID for staff. Name changes can be made through D&S if a candidate has gotten married, has gotten divorced, has changed their name legally through the court system. In order to make that change, they would need to submit to us the legal documentation noting that name change. So either a marriage license or a copy of the page from the divorce decree that determines what their name will now be. Could also provide adoption papers, or if they've now become a legalized citizen of the United States, they're able to change their name at that point. They are given a legal document showing what their new name is. Those papers would be faxed over to our office, and we will be happy to update the information in the system. How do I do this after a test has been scheduled? Once again, that information has to come directly to our office for us to update it at that point in order to make sure that the record is correct on the day of testing. Once again, to make that change for the staff before scheduling, you just log into the record, double click on their name until it turns blue, change the name, and submit the update to save the change. After they've been scheduled, submit the documentation into us, or if it's simply that the name was spelled incorrectly, they've not actually changed a name, it just needs to be corrected from a typo, you can just send us a copy of a government issued ID. We will make that change. We will also contact the testing staff to make sure that they're aware of that change prior to testing. Once again, if you change the name in the system after the staff is scheduled, but you do not send that documentation to us here at the office, when they go to testing, they will still be considered a no-show because the names do not match. What is classified as a no-show for testing? What is considered late for testing? When do I have to pay a no-show fee? What is classified as a no-show for testing would be anything that, as a result, the candidate is not eligible to test. Could mean that the name doesn't match. It could mean that the staff did not arrive on time. It can mean that they did not bring IDs with them that meet the requirements for testing. We have had also situations occur where staff schedule for skills portion of testing, in which case they are scheduled for both the medication administration and the transcription test. They will come in and take one portion of the test, but then leave before they take the other test. That will result in a no-show fee for the missed portion only. Keep in mind that staff do have to be signed in with the tester or proctor at least 15 minutes prior to the scheduled test time. This does not mean that they can be signed in with the front desk at the testing location. They actually need to be signed in with the tester or proctor. In review of testing percentages in the past 12 months, wanted to cover some data with you that we do not usually list. We usually only look at the no-show rate. What I wanted to do was look at the opposite side of that no-show percentage and show that the number of candidates who arrive for testing on time and are actually tested is actually 84.25%. That means that those folks came to testing, checked in with the tester or proctor at least 15 minutes prior to the scheduled test time, and their IDs met the requirements and their names matched. This number tells us that the policy information, the direction information, and the 15-minute requirement information is successfully being given to these candidates. If the percentages were switched and the percentage of staff that got to testing on time and were actually tested was the 15.75 and the 84.25 was the percentage of no-show, or if those percentages were closer to 50-50, we would realize that there was an issue with the way that that information is being given to the candidates. At this point, with that statistic being so high, that does indicate they are receiving the information and the correct information is making it to those candidates. Having said that, the no-show rate has risen. It has historically been at about 12%. At this point in time, the no-show rate for Massachusetts is 15.75% of staff scheduled for testing. This means that staff did not arrive for testing. They did not check in with a tester or proctor at least 15 minutes prior to their scheduled time, or their IDs didn't meet the requirements. And that would include name issues such as misspellings or missing juniors or giving you a different name than what actually shows on their ID. Once again, to avoid that situation with the IDs, we strongly suggest that you use the demographic verification form. This form does provide that opportunity before they're scheduled for testing to make any corrections that need to be made at that time. No-show percentages for April of 2015. We wanted to review to see what were the reasons in this 1-month time frame that candidates were no-shows for testing. Total number of no-shows for April of 2015, 269. Number of no-show candidates that were never seen by the tester or proctor. So that means that either they were very late for testing and the test had already started, so the tester or proctor did not see them, or the candidate never arrived for testing. That number is 196. Candidates who arrived late and were seen by the tester or proctor, 40. Candidates who had IDs or name issues, 15. Candidates who never arrived and we have that verified because they were scheduled at one of our PSI knowledge test sites, those proctors are able to see the entrance to their building during the entire test event. So if someone arrived late, they would be able to verify that information. Are there any circumstances for which the no-show fee could be waived? What is the procedure to have the fee waived? What documentation would be required? What are the time frames for applying for a waiver? There are some circumstances that would be allowed in order to waive the no-show fee. If their car broke down on the way to testing, they would be able to submit to our office within 48 hours of the test date a tow bill from a verifiable company in order to have that fee waived. If we do not receive the documentation within the 48-hour time frame, the no-show will remain in effect. They cannot submit to us a letter from their dad or their brother or their friend who came to assist them. It has to be from an actual tow company so that we can verify that incident did in fact occur on test day. They also cannot call our office and state to us that their car had broken down 2 weeks ago and they just didn't know that they wouldn't still be able to get to testing. That candidate had the ability to call us clear up until 2 business days prior to the test date to reschedule. They should have done that within that time frame or located other transportation to the test date. If they do not do that, then the no-show will remain in effect. Medical emergencies are another option. If a candidate is ill on test day, or they have a daughter or son that they are required to, that is ill, that they are required to seek medical attention for, they can submit to our office within 5 business days a doctor's note for that date. However, keep in mind that they must see the doctor or other HCP prior to or on the day of the test, and the note must cover the day of the test. In that 5 business days, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are excluded. If we do not receive proof of the 5 within the 5 business days time frame, you will remain a no-show. If your test is scheduled for Monday the 1st and you call us and tell us you're ill, but don't go to the doctor till Wednesday the 3rd and send that documentation in, we will not accept that. The doctor did not see you on the 1st, so they cannot verify that on the 1st you were ill. Death in the family. You must submit to us an obituary for an immediate family member only within 14 business days. Once again, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are excluded from that missed test date. Your name, the staff name, must appear in the obituary. If an obituary is not available, they may also submit to us a letter from the funeral director listing the name of the deceased person and the candidate name and how they are related. Now, if you fax or scan or email supporting documentation to our office, it is the candidate's responsibility to contact our office to ensure that we receive the documentation within the required time frame and to verify with us that the documentation meets all of the requirements in order to be rescheduled for testing without paying a no-show fee. If they do not contact our office and we did not receive the supporting documentation, they will be unable to resubmit that documentation if they're outside of the required time frame for that specific item. So it's very important when sending information in that they contact us to make sure that we have it for their record. On test day, DDS and DMH require staff to be signed in with the tester or proctor at least 15 minutes prior to the start time of the test. This is not a D&S Diversified Technologies policy. It is a mandate from DDS and DMH, and we are contractually required to follow this at every testing location and every testing day. Please keep in mind that vendors or agencies who are hosting test dates are only providing the space for that date, meaning they are not able to change any test policy on day of testing. Neither can the tester or proctor. They are required to follow the policy as posted. The tester manages all aspects of the test day, meaning signing in the staff, checking and verifying IDs, managing the test schedule, and processing all the paperwork that will come back to us in order to have the test graded. Testers and test candidates are guests at the site. We need to keep this in mind that when we're going to this location, that this is a working office, and things occurring during the test day affect this office's ability to work in the manner that they need to. To demonstrate the setup of a testing session, I'll use an example of a skills test session that is scheduled to start at 10 a.m. On that day, at 10 a.m., the candidates will be pulled into the testing area. Actually, let's start that one over, Courtney. To demonstrate the setup of a testing session, I will use the example of a skills test session that is scheduled to start at 10 a.m. At 9:45, the tester or proctor will be in the testing area, checking IDs, and signing in candidates. They will use the time listed either on the tablet they've been issued for testing or their cell phone. Both of those items are linked to a cellular company time frame. So to ensure that we are being consistent with what time it is, we have been directed by DDS and DMH to use times from one of those two items to start testing. We will not use a wall clock because we are unable to determine when the time was last checked to make sure that it is correct. If the batteries are fresh and it is holding the time correctly, they will be used from the tablet or a cell phone. Once everyone is checked in at 9:45 for this test session, the tester can either go ahead and start testing at that time, or if they need to set up some additional equipment, they can wait and actually start at 10 a.m., which was the posted time for the test. If anyone comes into the test session at 9:45 or after, they have not been signed in 15 minutes ahead of time, they will not be tested. How do I request accommodations for a candidate who may need ADA accommodations, or candidates who may need a paper test versus computer testing? Or how do I request a test in a language other than English? Paper tests can be requested for any staff at any test location, even if the testing at that location is routinely done on a computer. But in order to request that paper test, you are going to have to contact our office to have a special packet set up for that person. You need to make sure that you are scheduling a test date out at least 8 business days, because that is the time frame required to mail the papers to the tester for test day. If you're wanting to select a paper test for a staff member, you need to look directly below where the test site and date information appears. There is a box down there with the word paper listed beside it. In order to request the paper test for the staff member, you do need to put a check mark in the box beside paper and click Submit Updates before you schedule them. If you schedule them for a test date and then click paper and click submit updates, they are more than likely scheduled into a web packet and will be required to take that web test on test day. When selecting a test date, to ensure that you have a paper packet, you need to contact our office so we can set that up for you. Some candidates require ADA accommodations and scheduling. If your candidates need ADA accommodations, they need to be scheduled directly with our office, either through email or a phone call. This ensures access to the accommodations that the staff is approved for. If a staff is approved to have secluded testing and you log into the system and just schedule them into a packet that is available, you have just scheduled them into a session where other candidates are already scheduled to test, which means that during that time frame, we would not be able to give that candidate the secluded testing that they need and are approved for. So what you need to do is contact our office. They can be scheduled in the same day. Their test date will not be delayed because of the accommodations. We just need to make an adjustment in the way that the test packets are scheduled for that day to ensure that they get the accommodation that they need. We do see a large number of times when we go to create testing materials for a day that somebody has been scheduled into a packet with many other people and they do require secluded testing. What happens at that point is, if the day's full, we have to reschedule that candidate out that meets the ADA requirement of secluded testing into another test date. So please make sure that you're contacting us so we can get them scheduled as soon as possible and meet their needs. Testing for ESL staff. All tests are required to be administered in English. In review of federal ADA accommodations, ESL as English as a second language is not an ADA accommodation that is allowable under those guidelines. All tests are required to be administered in English. If your staff is going to a knowledge test or a skills test, they can take with them a paper version of a word-for-word translation book. The translation book cannot have any definitions in it. It cannot be electronic. There cannot be any handwriting in the book. So it specifically has to be word for word only. And then they could use that on their test. But understand that they will not be given additional time for testing. So if they are not familiar with a large portion of the words listed in English, they will more than likely run out of time during testing. Test sites. New test sites are listed on the website. Testing areas not being filled to capacity. Testing at your site for your staff only. New test sites are listed on the website at the top of the MAP Testing and Registry page in the blue box at the top right-hand side of the page. This is where not only new test sites, but all important update information from the state and from us is listed. You will see on this particular slide, it lists 2 new sites that have become available for testing and what portion of the test that they're testing on. There's also information listed about the Candidate Handbook being updated to include the wristwatch policy that has been in effect since October. It also does list the wristwatch policy for you so that you have that information. Testing at your site for your staff. The tester or proctor will come to your location to test your staff. There is a minimum number required to schedule the date. That number required will be determined by the tester or proctor that you select to come to the location. Depending on the amount of travel that they will be required to do to get to your site will determine the number they require for the test day. If you only have a few staff to test and you would still like them to test at your site, you have the ability to work with one or two other providers in your area so that it's still a closed test date, so not all candidates see that date, but that candidates from specific providers are able to schedule into your test date. That will allow the test date to fill or meet the minimum number required by the tester or proctor. Testing and training statistics, MedAdmin, transcription, and knowledge. You do have available to you pass-fail reports on our website. In order to get to those reports, you would go to the column that is titled Test Site Forms and MAP Trainers. You would scroll down to the button that is labeled Online Training Program Reports. You would click on that button. You would then log in with your provider or trainer information. If you log in as the trainer, you will only see data relevant to you and the provider that you are parented to with the code that you logged in. So if you train at several different providers, you have codes for each provider. So you would need to log in individually to find your statistics based on that particular provider. If you log in as the provider, you will see data relevant to all trainers who are linked to you, parented to your organization. So when you log in, it will bring up this screen. You have available to you several different reports. You would select the particular report that you want to review by putting a dot in the circle beside the name for that report. You would then enter the date range that you would like the report data to be run for. List then your provider information or trainer information and click Login. The first report available on that list are written or knowledge test details. This will list for you for the written portion of the test. At the top are each of the areas for which questions are asked on the knowledge test. This will give you a percentage of the questions in that area that are answered correctly. Below that box, there are a list of vocabulary words. Down here, it will list for you the number of times questions were missed on that vocabulary word, as well as the percentage of times that the question was missed when it was asked. An example is the first word on the list is 5 rights. The number of times that a question was missed on the 5 rights, 6,739 times. While that seems like that's a very large number, and it is a large number, you then need to take into consideration that beside 5 rights, it lists 15%. What that 15% means is that questions on the 5 rights were missed 15% of the time that they were asked. So that means that 85% of the time that a question on 5 rights was asked, it was answered correctly. So even though that 6,000 number is high, it's not an overall high percentage based on the number of times that a question was asked. When you print this report, it will be several pages long. I did it truncated on this slide so that we would be able to show you the information and what that means in relation to overall testing statistics. But once again, once you print that out, it'll list every vocabulary word used in a test in the time frame that you select. The next report is the pass-fail report. This report will list for you within the time frame that you select all of the candidates or staff that you had tested, when they had completed their training, when their test date was, whether they passed or failed, and what portion of the test it was that they were taking. You do see in the one that I printed out for you that under candidate it lists everyone's name as staff name. I took this data from an actual provider, and to ensure that there was privacy for these staff that had actually tested, I altered the names. Your staff names would actually show there. At the bottom underneath facility totals, it would also list the name of your provider and your 4-digit ID number. When you look at the bottom of the form, you see that for the written test, it lists a number of 9 with 100% pass rate, and that is above the state average. For skills, you see it lists a number, and that the overall percentage is 29%, and they are below the state average in that pass rate for the skills. When you look at the numbers for the written test and the skill test individually on this report, that indicates the number of tests administered within the time frame you selected. So if a candidate had taken the written test twice within that time frame, those 2 tests would both be listed in that number. When you get over to the total percentage at the end, it gives you an overall number of all tests included, but those numbers are based on the number of candidates tested and where they are at in the testing process at the point that the report was created for. So once again, the numbers for the written and the skills test are based on the number of tests that have been administered in the time frame. The total number underneath total is the number of candidates tested. It will give you your overall pass rate at that point as well, and list for you what the variable is from the state average. On the skills test detail report, it will break down for you by both medication administration and transcription each version of those tests that are administered, the pass rate per step. Keep in mind that every version of the medication administration has the exact same steps required. The steps do not vary. What varies is the scenario that they are given at the beginning of the test, whether it is for John Smith or Clyde Davis or Sally Smith, and which drug they are to administer. They are actually told the name of the person and what time they are administering a drug for. They are then required to go into the med book to locate the drug that they will be administering and move forward from that process. On the transcription, once again, we have several different scenarios that they're given, but all of the steps are exactly the same. This will be a multi-page report again, because it will break down for you, as I said, each version of the test. Overall, the steps, the percentages on each step run in the same manner over each version of the test. They may alter a little just dependent on sometimes in the transcription, if it's a medication that's going to be administered 3 times a day as opposed to twice a day. There may be some additional issue with the times for that drug to be administered or the grid. So that may alter a little bit the percentages, but for the most part, they're very consistent. The retake summary will list for you when logged in as the provider each of your trainers and how many times their staff historically have to retake each portion of the test in order to pass. Data included in these reports is going to be data relevant to their current training. It will not include any prior trainings or any prior refresher trainings that they did, only the current data that is in their record. There is also available for you a no-show summary. You can print this out for any specific time frame. And on this report, you will see that the last candidate on this list actually no-showed twice within the time frame that they ran the report. This is just documentation for you to indicate if you have a particular staff that is continually no-showing for testing to determine if you're having an issue in that area. Trainer-specific pass-fail reports. Trainer-specific pass-fail reports are available as well. Trainers can log in with their trainer information and print those reports and give those to you. We cannot send those over to you, but certainly as a provider, you have the right to ask the trainer for those reports specific to your provider, or if you are hiring a new trainer, you have the availability to ask them for training reports based through other providers so you can see historically how they've performed. If you have any questions about these reports, please call our office and I will be happy to walk through them with you so that you understand the data that we are trying to give to you to improve the testing and training process for your agency. That is all the information we have for today. I do want to thank you for taking the time to review this information with us. Have a nice day.